Welcome to the long-awaited season finale of our modern Next.js booking system. It's gonna be great because in this episode we're gonna implement the payment. So users could previously add they couldn't even add items to the cart. They could just view items on the menu after doing a logic check and selecting the date and time. Now they can actually add it to a cart. That looks good because we're gonna do it with a UI library. Don't worry, I'm not gonna get into the CSS, but it is gonna look really good. You don't have to write it yourself. The code is going to be in the GitHub for the CSS stuff. No need to write it yourself. And then users can actually check out. They will get redirected to a success page with an order summary that we keep in local storage. It's going to be really cool. So let's get into the whole payment integration and into the finale of our modern full stack booking system. So to get started with the payment and the whole checkout process, let's get started adding a cart. That is the first thing we're going to do. It's a cart component that's going to be shown on the front end, so the user knows what's in their cart and can also check out. And as you saw in the intro, the cart looks really good. And we're going to do that with Tailwind UI. Now, I'm not going to write this code as it is, because this is literally just a lot of CSS that we don't need to worry about. You can find this in the GitHub repo, or you can do this yourself. Just implement a very nice looking cart yourself. That's totally fine as well. So I'm just gonna paste this in, and then let's get started with the real cart. So this is gonna get an onClose property that we want to happen when we close the cart, and also we want to determine whenever this cart is shown or not. And maybe I can make, no, that's a bit too large probably. And actually, yeah, I can make this a bit larger. And yeah, just a show and an onClose property that we are gonna get from the props. So the props are gonna be an open, which is a boolean, a set open, which is just a regular state setter and not a function we make from it. Then the products the user has in their cart, which we're gonna configure in the different components here in a second. And then also a function that lets us remove something from the cart. And that's it. We are gonna receive those in the component props, and then get started on the actual logic in the cart. We need the router for later, and then we're gonna have some TRPC stuff. And this TRPC stuff is gonna be the items in the cart that we're gonna fetch, and we need a route for that because we need the AWS S3 URLs. So that's gonna be trpc.menu.getCartItems.useQuery. Now that route doesn't exist yet, but we're gonna create it together after we finish this component. So what are we going to pass into that query? Well, it's going to be the products. So whatever the user has in their cart with the product ID and the product quantity that we have as an array, we're going to pass that to the query and then get all the necessary information for those products. Okay, and then we also want the checkout, right? Because the checkout is going to happen from the cart. That's also going to be a TRPC route or a regular Next.js route. If that's your thing and you don't use TRPC, that's totally fine as well. Or Node.js also works. In my case, this is going to be trpc.checkout.checkoutSession, which is also a route we're going to create, .useMutation. And whenever the route has come back successfully, what do we want to happen? Well, from Stripe, which we're going to use as a payment handler, we're going to get a URL that handles the entire payment process for us that we need to forward the user to. So that's what we're doing. And then whenever we submit this request, so before the success even happens, we want to save the products to local storage so we can then show them on the success page later if everything went well with Stripe. All right, these types don't exist yet because we haven't created that route, but we're gonna do that. And then we also want to calculate the subtotal that we can show to the user in the cart. And we're gonna do that by reducing the items in the cart to their price. So we're adding the accumulator and then we are adding the item price times the quantity that we're finding dynamically to the accumulator and are thereby getting the subtotal. Now, if this is null or undefined, we're gonna put it as 0. And then we want that as two, after the comma or after the dot in American format, just two, I'm not sure what it's called, but like two numbers behind the comma or the dot. And then we want to implement that route in the button. So this is the checkout button that we have right here. As you can see, there's a bunch of CSS classes, but this is the checkout functionality that we wanted to handle. And also, what do we want the button to say? If it is loading, then we want to show a spinner, or if it's not, then we want the regular checkout text. Okay, Now let's map over every item we have in this items in cart array. So whatever the user has in their cart, we're gonna return a bunch of CSS and HTML that we're not gonna worry about, but the logic we're gonna do together. So let's find the current item. You know, we are in the products, remember? This was an array of IDs and of IDs, which are strings, and the quantity as a number. And in here, we are going to the products and then finding the product that is this item right here. So we can then work with that in the HTML or JSX, which is essentially just HTML. We need the name of the item. We want to show the price. And then we're going to map over the categories and capitalize and join them. So for example, this could be something like breakfast or lunch. These are the categories, but we can get rid of that. And then we want to show the quantity. How many does the user have in their cart? And also, whenever the user clicks on the remove button, they should be able to remove something from the cart. And to do that, we've got this function right here that, if you remember, we are getting as a prop from wherever this cart component gets rendered. Okay, and I think that is it. Yes, that's the component done. This is the cart.tsx. All right, really nice. Now there are a couple of things missing, right? The get cart items route, for example, the checkout route. And I think before we get on with the menu.tsx, which is the page that we have, I think it makes sense to actually get into the routes first. So the arrows are gone here. So let's worry about the menu items route for now. As you remember, we want to get the cart items because we also need the signed Amazon URLs to show the images. Let's create a route for that. So we call it item in cart here, but I call it get cart items here. You know what I mean? So let's get started. Okay, so a method for fetching all items in the user's cart, which returns an array of all menu items with their respective image URL, which is the entire point of this route, that we get the image URLs. This is going to be a public procedure. You can also have this as an authenticated procedure if you want to require the user to log in before being able to order. Well, you probably do that at the checkout route right here. This could still be a public procedure. Anyone should be able to view what they have in their cart, right? What are we expecting as an input for this regular NextJS API route? An array of objects and each containing an ID and a quantity. So it's the same thing as right here with the ID and the quantity. And then we've got a query. This is not going to be a mutation, but we would just want to make a GET request to get some information. We are going to make a request to our database with Prisma, finding a lot of items, depending on this where property right here. And we are getting every item which is in the item.id array that we are creating right here. Great. So we're fetching all the menu items, and then they only contain their AWS key, right? If I hover over those, I don't think you can see it, but there's an image key in here, which maps to an AWS key to get that image. And now to get the image URLs, we're going to map over them, return the original item, and then also append the URL that we get from S3. And also we want the quantity. So we're also going to add that to the menu items and then return with URLs. And now you can see we've got the URL that we just added, and then the quantity, which is a number or undefined. Before it was just the image key that we've got for AWS. All right, and that's a lot of the arrows gone here. Now let's get into the checkout route. So let me move that here. This is going to handle all the checkout logic with Stripe. So a really important route. And first off, we're going to initialize a new Stripe. So I call this _Stripe, which we get from Stripe, the NPM package. If you're following along since part 3 or 4, this is not installed yet. So you can say npm install Stripe or yarn add Stripe. That's where we get it from. And then initialize that with a process.env.stripe secret key. Now, if you don't have that, Stripe makes it really easy. So let me show you what this looks like. When we go into the Stripe dashboard, we can go into our API keys here. I've just got a test account, so this is not real data. But in here, you can see reveal test key, and whatever is behind this button right here is what we want to paste in our .env file. as the Stripe secret key, or whatever you want to call it. That is totally fine as well. Okay, and with that Stripe, we can create our actual endpoint. This is going to be a router from tRPC or a regular Next.js API route if you're not using tRPC, and everyone can do this. Now, this is the point where I mentioned earlier, you could use an authenticated procedure and force the user to log in with, Google or with password and email and so on first. And I didn't choose to do that. I'm just fine with everyone doing this. Everyone can create a Stripe session and then order without being logged in. I think that is fine for my use case, but you might want something different. Commonly, this is actually authenticated. So for example, on Amazon, you cannot buy without an account, right? So in most cases, this would be an authenticated procedure. Okay, what are we expecting as an input? An object that has an array of products, and every product, as you already know, has an ID and a quantity, which must be at least one. Otherwise, you can't make a request to this endpoint. And then for the actual logic of the endpoint, we're going to have a try catch beginning with a try. And then here, first we want the products in the user's cart. To do that, we are going into Prisma again, querying our database, and then same thing as before, we are getting all the products that are in the IDs that we passed to this endpoint, and then mapping over them to append some data to them. So for every product, every P, we are spreading in the P and then appending the quantity of that product by finding it in the array and then just getting the quantity or 0. And if we don't have them, like if the lengths don't match, then we are throwing a new error with a code of conflict and letting the user know that some products are not available. However, this error right now is not being caught on the front end. That would be very simple. You could just destructure the error from tRPC like this error, and here you get the error message. However, I kind of skimmed along because this is not a real user-facing project. But if you use this for production, you'd probably want to error handle correctly there, just like I showed you, and then just show the error message to the user. Okay, now we are creating the Stripe session, which is really easy with Stripe. Essentially, we can define the payment types. We can also add a lot of different types. Stripe supports a lot of different payment types. We're not going to do that. But this is going to be of mode payment. We're just going to use the regular credit card, nothing else. And then for the items that we want the user to have in their checkout and that are also going to be used to calculate the total, it's going to be everything that is in their cart. That's why we had the this one here earlier. So we're going to use that right here. And then for every product, we want the price data in US dollars with the product name being shown. So for example, avocado, $20 is being shown to the user, and this is the price that is shown and also used to calculate. So whatever the price is from our database, really important, do not get this from the client. This needs to come from your database. You never trust client input. Remember, the price should not be coming from the client. That's why we are getting it from the database up here. And then we're doing that times 100 because this is like 8.5, for example. So in Stripe, that's going to be in thousands. That's why we're multiplying it by 100. And then also the quantity for it. Then the shipping options are going to be really simple because we are just offering a store pickup and no shipping with a success URL where the user gets redirected to whenever they have completed their purchase inside of the Stripe URL. And then a cancel URL that the user gets redirected back to if they don't. And then we are returning the session URL or just an empty string. And that is it. We also need a catch. Now, if the message, if the error, not the message, is an instance of error, then we're setting the message to the error.message and throwing that as a tRPC error. And if it's not, then we're just saying payment failed. And yep, that's the entire route done. Great. Now this is still throwing an error. Aha, and the reason this route is not seen yet is because we also need to add it right here in our router like that. So we're saying whenever we want to query the checkout API endpoint, that's going to be mapped to the checkout router that we have just created with this router right here. All right, really good. We are plowing ahead with the menu.tsx. If you look where it is in the file tree, you can see it's under pages and then menu.tsx. So this is a page, and we want to make some slight modifications. This page is not new. That's why there's already a bunch of code here that we've created in the previous parts, but we are going to improve some logic in this page.tsx. So instead of rendering the fragment that we had before with a regular button under it, which I just removed in this one, we are going to render a div and then the cart icon, because on the menu we want to show the user what they have in their cart. And to do that, we're going to have a div with a class name of flex, w full for full width, and justify end. And then inside of there, we're going to have a button that has an on click that sets a state. That state doesn't exist yet, but we're using it to show the cart to determine whether it should be shown or not. And then showing an icon next to that that's coming from react-icon/bs. That's where we get the bs cart from. And then what should the button say? Well, we are reducing the products in the cart to essentially their quantity, and we're starting from 0. So it just shows how many products are in the cart. And then we are rendering out the cart. Now, if you remember, this cart takes a bunch of props, right, that we need to pass from this menu.tsx component. And we are adding those. So remove from cart, open, set open, and also the products. Now, where are we getting them from? Well, good question. So let's start with a mutation. And on success, we are gonna push to the URL. And honestly, I kind of forgot why we have this in here. It will become clear later. I'm pretty sure we use it at some point, but let's just leave it in there for now. And if we don't use it, then I'm going to remove it. All right, but let's initialize the state that determines whether the cart should be shown or not in large view. That's why we're doing this. We're always showing the icon, but this is to determine whether the cart should be shown in large view or not. Now the state is going to be a Boolean, and it's going to be false by default. Great, and that's the first 2 errors gone. So we have the open and then the set open, which already exists in this state right here. And then we want to determine the products in the user's cart. That's going to be a state, and that is going to be of type with the ID or quantity that you already know. And we're going to have an array of that, and that is going to be initialized as an empty array. Now let's add a function that lets us add to the cart, right? So when we need to add to the cart, we need the ID of what we want to add, and then also the quantity. We could default this as 1, which would probably make sense. I didn't choose to. So to add something to the cart, we're going to have the state setter right here, and then we are receiving whatever it was previously as the first argument. So let's do a little check. First, let's find the existing item. And if it is already existing, then we can map over everything. And if it's in there already, we can just add to the quantity, right? Really useful. And if it's not, then we're going to actually add this item. And then we are returning the state with everything that was in there previously. That's why this prev right here is so useful, that we get by default with React state, and then essentially pushing one object into this array. That's going to be at the end. Not that that would really matter, but essentially we're just pushing that into the state array. Okay, now to have a function that lets us remove from the cart, we just need the ID, because we're removing everything from the cart, which, you know, maybe you don't want that. Then you'd have to implement some logic for that, like also the quantity in here. I just chose to remove everything if you click the remove button. And essentially, it's going to be really easy. We're just filtering whatever it was previously, and then comparing if the ID that we want to remove is in there, then we're just going to filter that out. Okay, and with this filter and the functions done, last thing we want to do is pass the menu the add to cart function like this. Now the menu has no idea what this is yet. It's like, what the hell, bro? What are you passing me there? So we need to define that, right? If we want to have this as a prop in the menu, we need to define its type, because we're working in TypeScript, and it's going to be, the type of add to cart. So we can hover over this, we can copy this type, paste it in here, and it's going to be ID and quantity as the parameters, and that's going to return a void. Okay, now in the menu, we're just going to make some slight modifications. We also want a purchase button. So that's going to be in here with a class name of margin top 4. So it stands out a bit from the categories that are above it. Then the on-click handler, where we just want to call the function we've just created inside of menu.tsx, adding the ID and then a quantity of 1. That's why I said you could default this. and that button is going to say add to cart. Now, if you don't know where this button is coming from, this is not a custom component, but rather it comes from Chakra UI, because the loading state and everything is already in Chakra UI's buttons. That's why I think they are really, really convenient. And that is the menu done. Great, we can close out of a bunch of this stuff, by the way. Last thing we want to do is the success page. So when the user has successfully made a purchase. However, before we do that, we can actually take a look at the live demo. So the service already started. Let's go to localhost 3000 and see what happens. So let me scroll out a whole bit here. Actually, let me do this full screen. Okay, so let's say we want to order tomorrow on the 20th of January at 8 o'clock. Everything is fine with that. So we're getting redirected to the menu. Let's say we want to eat lunch and the steak looks really good. Let's add it to the cart. This is the button we've just done. And as you see, it got added up here in the cart. When we click that, the shopping cart pops open. This is the cart component that we've written right here, this one. That is popping open. We can also remove the steak. That also removes our subtotal. We can add a bunch of steaks like this. So we have quantity of 3 steaks right now. And now we can click checkout and let's see what happens. So it starts loading and then we get redirected to the Stripe site. So essentially the URL that you can see up here, the checkout.stripe.blah blah blah, whatever, that comes from our route that we have right here. Actually, no, that's going to be a checkout route. That's the session.url right here, right? This is not one of these, but instead is a session URL generated by Stripe. And then whenever we have successfully done the purchase in this Stripe window right here, we are getting redirected to either the success or, if it didn't work, to the cancel URL. But just for some context, this is the URL coming from Stripe and that we push to in the router. That's why we had the onSuccess handler with the checkout route that you could see. Well, no, it wasn't here, right here. So we're pushing to the URL that we get back from Stripe. And also we're setting the products to local storage so we can then show them in the success page. Now let's test this out. I'm going to enter some email. These values do not need to be correct as long as you are in Stripe test mode. And what I'm seeing on my left screen here is the testing stuff for Stripe. So we can have a credit card number right here, and we can just let me copy that like that. All right, we're just gonna copy this number. There are like numbers for successful purchases and wrong purchases, so you can test everything with Stripe. We're gonna enter some fake data right here. Name on card doesn't matter, and then we can click pay. Now this will work because this is in Stripe test mode, so everything is gonna be fine, and we're getting redirected to the success page. Now the success page we haven't yet created, but this is what it's gonna look like, and we are creating that right now. And the success right here. So we don't have anything yet. And to get started, we want the product state, right? We want to know if the user has already some products in the local storage. And if so, we want to save them in state. As you already know by now, these products are the ID and quantity, an array of them, or null or false. So before anything has happened, it's going to be null if we don't know whether it is in local storage yet or not. And if it is not, and we know it's not, then it's going to be false. But we're initializing the state as null because we don't know by default. Now, with the TRPC stuff, we want the items in the cart, right? Because they will be shown right here. So we need to know what is in the cart and also the image URLs for that. And for that, we're just going to pass the products. Now you can see, because this is either null or false, we can't assume that this will work. And that's why if the products don't exist, we're gonna pass an empty array into that. Then the total, we're gonna do the same thing as in the cart component, just reduce the items in the cart down to their price, essentially, with the price of the respective item, and then its quantity. And then we are fixing that to 2 numbers after the dot or comma. Now, inside of the use effect, we want to figure out whether the data is already in local storage, right? Because we set it there when we started the purchase, and then after we completed the purchase, let's check if it's in the local storage. And if it's not, then we're setting this to false, so we know, no, it's not there, we can't show this. Or if there are, then we're parsing them from the JSON we set them to, because in the card we set them as JSON.stringify, we're parsing them back here. and then setting the state. And if the products are not existent yet, so if it's still loading, we don't know if they will exist here in a second, then we're just going to show a spinner. So a big div that covers the whole screen and a spinner that comes from Chakra UI right here. And if the products are definitely not in the local storage, then chances are the user just entered the URL without making a purchase, and then we're returning a div saying, bruh, what do you want on this page? Because bruh, what do they want on this page? And then we're gonna have a big block of CSS and HTML if everything is fine. So this is the whole CSS and HTML you can see on this page with an image and stuff that comes from Tailwind UI that we're not gonna get in detail because it's just CSS. You can find all this in the GitHub repo. And in here, we're gonna say, or we're gonna map through the items. And for every item, there's a bunch of data that we're gonna fill out right now. So for example, an image of the item, this one right here, or this one. Then we also want the item name, the category, and we're joining them together because this is a string array. That's gonna be this lunch, comma, dinner right here, and capitalizing each one of them because by default from the database, they are lowercase. And also we want the price right here fixed to two comma numbers. So even if this were like 6.5, there would still be a 6.50 at the end. And then we want to display the total down right here. And what is the total gonna be? Well, the total is gonna be the total that we have defined right here with a use reducer. And that is everything. We're done. That is the whole success page. And that means everything is working just fine. So whenever we order successfully, this is the page we're being redirected to, and we can see all the orders in our Stripe dashboard. So we don't need to build a custom dashboard for this, but instead we can see all the orders that came in and then prepare them if we were the restaurant. So let's go through it one more time. And this, what is happening? 22nd? Oh, I think I tried to figure out a logic bug in the application on the Sunday. If we look into the dashboard, I think we are actually closing before we open. That was a logic bug I tried to find. It's going to the opening hours and then Sunday 11. Yeah, okay, so this was just a bug. So that is still in the application. By the way, if you want to actually do this yourself and improve on this project, I've added a bunch of stuff for potential improvements in the README that we're not going to do together in this tutorial because they are rather easy tasks, but nonetheless really important if this should be production grade that you definitely want to worry about. And in here you can see prevent admin from opening later than they are closing, which I just fixed right now, but the logic is still possible, which doesn't make sense obviously. So that's why the Sunday didn't work just now. But now it will, so we can click 11 o'clock if we were a person wanting to order for that time. And we want 3 steaks and 1 tortilla and 1 guacamole. It's going to be 5 items in the cart at $82.46. No problem. We can click checkout. Because we have a credit card that never gets canceled, we can just order that. So let me copy the credit card data from here. Email doesn't matter. This doesn't matter as well. This can be fake data. Name on card does not matter either. We can click pay, and after a second of payment processing, we get redirected to the success page with everything that we've just ordered. And I just see the quantity is not here. So you probably want to add the quantity here. But that's it. That's really cool. It's going to be our checkout. And everything is working just fine. We can click continue shopping if we wish to, although I don't know why anyone would do that. And that's it. This is our booking software. If you got any more suggestions for this, if I forgot something really important, definitely let me know in the comments and I will fix that. However, everything is working just fine as of now. I'm really happy with this. I hope you had a lot of fun following along. I hope you learned a lot of stuff in this whole project and found it as cool as I did, because this is like useful stuff, right? If you build some kind of like this stuff, this is actually used in the real world and it's really useful. That's why I like building this sort of stuff, and that's pretty much it. Everything is done. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, leave them below. And yeah, have a good one. Thank you for watching and bye-bye.